Page 12, Minuet in G major by J.S. Bach. I like the fingering this book uses. I like Suzuki's fingerings for the most part. Yeah. Right at the beginning, there in the right hand, see the fingering? It's 5-4-5. It gets back to what I'm saying. If you have repeated notes, use different fingers. And I like that. I completely agree with it. Take a look at the second line there. In the second measure in the right hand, you have an E, 4 on the C. Come down, and cross over for the next measure. And measure 9, that's the first measure of the last line. Again, 5-4-5. It's just like the first measure, so use the same fingering. Top of page 13, first line, second measure, again, you have a 5 and use the 4 on the C. Just pointing it out, I'm not changing nothing. Second line, last two measures in the right hand, it's a D, second finger. And then last measure is 3-1. And then cross the 3 over. Now coming from this A to the next A, and the next, see, it's the first measure of the third line, just reach your hand up. Don't connect the A's. You can put a little space between them, but you don't need to move your hand up. You can reach up and just, and then once you have it, if you're good enough to play music like this, I think you're good enough to read the finger numbers without me pointing everything out. For the left hand, at the top of page 12, second measure, that is a dotted half note. You got to hold it down for the whole measure. Now, in Bach, he did not put in any articulation or dynamics or tempo or nothing. And it wasn't the way it was done back then. All they did is furnish the notes, and sometimes they didn't even do that. They just furnished chord symbols. Generally, the musician was expected to know how to play musically. That is, they were expected to know how to do the articulation. Suzuki has not put in any articulation in here at all to speak of. A lot of editors put in a lot of articulation. If you look at other editions of this book, of this piece, you will find where they've added staccatos and slurs and all kinds of things in there. My suggestion to you is keep it simple. If the notes are close together and connected like this, you connect them. And you can listen to it and pretty much figure out where the sentences are for the phrasing, and you can phrase it that way. But it's like in the left hand, where the second measure you have this. When the notes are that jumping around like that, we generally separate them. We don't play them staccato, it's just separate them. It adds a little bit to it. As a general rule, not all the time, but as a general rule, especially in the left hand, if the notes have some space between them, they're intervals, larger intervals than a second or third, put some space between, a little bit of silence between each note, just a little bit, not a lot. It just adds a little articulation rather than playing it all even. That is not the way Bach wanted it played. If you had a teacher, they would be putting this junk in according to their understanding of how it would go. A different teacher would put in other stuff because they understood it differently. Let's go over to page 13, second line, last measure in the left hand. Again, we have a dotted half note. Hold it down as you play these other notes. And that's a stretch. That might be hard for you to do, but do the best you can. If you can't reach it, then you'll have to release the dotted half note at the last second. But try and hold it down if you can. And again, I would separate it. And then you can connect the eighth notes. Third line down, third measure, again, with a half note. I would separate those notes. So again, the third line down on the third measure, I would separate those notes in the left hand. Fourth line down, last two measures in the left hand, they've got some alternate fingerings again. First, they're showing 1, 3, 2, 1. And again, if you're separating the notes like I'm suggesting, that's not a problem. You can do that. Or you can try the fingering, which is a little easier. There's a 1, 3, 1, 2, and actually I like that better. The last two measures, separate those notes in the left hand. Just a little bit of silence between each one. Notice the repeat signs. You have a repeat sign at the bottom of page 13, which goes back to the reverse repeat sign at the beginning of the second line on page 13. So we're going to play that part twice. We are going to go slow. Minuet is a dance. A minuet is an aristocratic dance they used to do back when the big wigs thought the waltz was for peasants and only peasants did waltzes. Then later on in life, or as the generation, the aristocracy realized the waltz was actually a whole lot more fun than the minuet, and it kind of, they adopted the waltz as their thing too. So then they started doing the waltz. But this is a minuet. It's a choreographed dance, a predecessor, if you will, to the waltz in a way. Not really, there were waltzes at the same time. So you have to get into the mood, think you're in some palace dancing this dance that you've learned all the steps to, and everybody's making the same moves at the same time, and it's sort of like line dancing, except it's not, you're not in lines so much. The melody for the most part is in the right hand, although the left hand does have some moving parts that you want to bring out. So let's try this out. 3/4 time, I'll give us 3 counts and we'll play it together. 1, ready, go.